At 9:27 a.m., on the 13th of December, 1943, Second Lieutenant Philip Adair gripped the controls of his P-40 Newton's Warhawk, climbing into the morning sky over Assam, India. The sun was just beginning to burn through the haze when, 3 miles to the east, a massive Japanese formation appeared, glinting in the light 64 aircraft, barreling toward Denjan airfield. Adair, just 23 and already seasoned with 43 combat missions protecting the Hump airlift, was the only pilot airborne. Today, he would face an enemy that could crush him in seconds. Intelligence had warned of these raids. In the past 2 months, Japanese attacks had wiped out nearly 50 Allied transports and claimed more than 100 lives across northeast India. Below him, Denjan's 14 C-47 transports were fully loaded with supplies destined for Chiang Kai-shek's forces in China. The field's hospital treated dozens of wounded, and fuel stockpiles promised to keep the vital airlift running for another 11 days. If the bombers reached their target unchallenged, the consequences would be catastrophic. Adair's P-40, affectionately called Lulu Bell, sported 2 .50-caliber machine guns and a handful of ammo, just enough for 12 seconds of full fire. He checked his fuel, 180 gallons, about 90 minutes at full combat power. Below him, the enemy's formation spread like a living net across the sky. 24 Mitsubishi Ki-21 bombers, escorted by roughly 40 nimble Nakajima Ki-43 fighters. The bombers' tight formations had already proven deadly in Burma, achieving near-perfect strike rates on undefended targets. And the nearest friendly fighters? Almost 40 minutes away. Doctrine dictated patience when outnumbered 5-1. Adair was facing 64. Shadowing the formation, waiting for backup, would almost certainly allow the bombers to rain destruction on Denjan. Yet attacking alone was a gamble against impossible odds. He pushed the throttle forward, and the Allison engine roared, climbing to 320 miles per hour. He angled above the Japanese formation, the sun at his back, unseen, unexpected. Surprise was his only ally. The lead bombers flew in tight V-shaped clusters, unaware of the lone American above them. Adair rolled inverted, nose diving toward the unsuspecting formation. Airspeed surged past 360 miles per hour. The first burst of 50-caliber fire ripped through the lead bomber's port engine, flames erupting in a violent orange flare. Chaos erupted. Bombers scattered left and right, formations breaking apart as adrenaline took over. Adair yanked up hard, the forces pinning him to the seat as the Japanese fighters swooped in. 40 Oscars, the most maneuverable planes in the theater, surrounded him. Turning with them meant death. He relied on speed, hit-and-run tactics, forcing the Japanese to adjust, hesitate, and miss their bombing run. Each attack, each dodge, stretched him closer to his limits. His ammunition dwindled, his fuel remained precious, yet the bombers were still dangerously close to Denjan. A sudden head-on dive from 2 enemy fighters tested every reflex. Tracers zipped past him, a lethal ballet of fire and steel. His rounds tore into the lead aircraft, forcing it to break formation. Another pass. Another bomber disabled. Behind him, the remaining bombers attempted to regroup, their deadly V-shapes reforming. Time was slipping away. Adair's engine temperature climbed past 230 degrees. Coolant boiled. Metal screamed under stress. He could either pull back, save the engine, and risk the bombers reaching their target, or keep fighting, flirting with total mechanical failure. He stayed on the attack. More Oscars lunged, but he dove, climbed, and outpaced them in sheer speed, forcing the bombers to scatter again. Each maneuver pushed the P-40 further beyond its safe limits. Smoke began to curl from his cockpit as rounds punched through fuselage and wiring. Visibility worsened. Carbon monoxide burned his lungs. His plane, wounded and struggling, still refused to fall. Then came the moment that would define the legend. Damage to his control surfaces meant normal flight could kill him. Every instinct screamed to bail out. Every rational thought demanded retreat. Instead, Adair made an unthinkable choice. Flipping the aircraft inverted, he used the damaged aileron and stuck elevator to his advantage. Negative G pressed him into his seat as the jungle rushed past upside down. The engine sputtered, nearly died, then roared again. Adair fought the controls, alternating between inverted and upright flight, each flip buying precious altitude, each maneuver keeping him alive. The Japanese watchers, circling above, could only gape at the impossible sight of a lone P-40 clawing its way through the sky, defying every expectation. With his targets scattered, Denjan temporarily safe, and enemy fighters bewildered, Adair continued his rolling climb toward the relative safety of Naguli airfield. Every gauge warned of imminent failure, engine oil at zero, temperature beyond redline. But somehow, the Warhawk held. This was no longer just a fight against enemy planes. It was a battle of survival, wit, and sheer determination, testing the limits of man and machine alike. Naguli airfield appeared ahead, a ribbon of concrete cutting through the jungle. Adair's P-40, still trailing smoke, was barely holding together. The engine's roar was uneven, the vibrations shaking the plane through every control. Oil pressure had been zero for minutes. Every second felt like a countdown toward disaster. Behind him, the 6 remaining Oscars circled, watching. They weren't attacking. Why risk bullets on a plane already on the edge of death? Adair's mind raced. The hydraulic system for his landing gear relied on engine pressure. Minimal power meant minimal control. He tried the gear lever, nothing. He couldn't risk letting go of the control stick. The damaged ailerons and elevator would send him into a dive. Thinking fast, he looped his lap belt around the stick and seat frame, holding it roughly neutral. Then, both hands on the backup manual pump, he began to stroke furiously. 5, 10, 28 pumps later, he felt resistance. The left main gear dropped into place with a jolt. Seconds later, the right followed. The Warhawk's drag increased dramatically, slowing him further, but now at least he had a fighting chance to land. Airspeed fell to 135 miles per hour. His engine, struggling at less than half power, groaned under the stress. Smoke filled the cockpit, blinding him intermittently. Grey shadows closed in at the edges of his vision, a cruel reminder of carbon monoxide poisoning. The runway stretched ahead, 2 miles, 1.5. Every moment, he calculated if the engine quit now, he would crash short. But he pressed on. Then it happened. The Allison V-1710 coughed, sputtered, and died. The P-40 became a heavy glider, unresponsive, stubbornly refusing to obey. With only a few thousand feet above the jungle, Adair made another split-second decision. He remembered training about inverted flight for glide performance. Rolling the aircraft upside down, he reduced drag and extended his glide just enough. The world was upside down, the jungle a blur above him, but somehow he gained precious feet of altitude, inching closer to safety. The Oscars watched, baffled. The lone American seemed to defy physics, logic, and fate itself. Their curiosity turned to caution. They weren't going to risk another shot. Adair alternated between upright and inverted flight, every maneuver a calculated risk, every second a dance on the razor's edge. His mind was sharp, focused purely on survival, yet exhaustion gnawed at him. Sweat and soot stung his eyes, fingers cramped on the controls, lungs burning with carbon monoxide. At 1,200 feet, the runway was just ahead. He adjusted the glide, leveling the plane upside down, carefully controlling descent with only what little aerodynamic leverage the damaged aircraft allowed. The landing gear, extended while upside down, strained against unusual forces, but it held. His vision tunneled. The airfield grew larger in the canopy, a lifeline just out of reach. Adair rolled right side up to line up for the final approach. The engine, though dead, had allowed just enough momentum for controlled flight. The Warhawk glided, a wounded bird, but still obedient to the pilot's skill and sheer willpower. Every second, every foot descended with a deadly precision. One miscalculation, one uncontrolled drop, and the jungle would claim him. Ground crews spotted the approaching aircraft, smoke trailing, erratic yet strangely controlled. Technical Sergeant Robert Martinez and others froze, unsure whether it was an enemy aircraft daring a final attack or an American pilot performing an impossible stunt. The plane, upside down, gear down, smoke curling, seemed to hang in the air as if caught between death and survival. Adair began the final adjustments. Flapless landing, minimal engine power, limited control, everything was stacked against him. He eased the plane closer, keeping just enough speed to avoid stalling, but slow enough to touch down safely. The runway loomed closer, 1,000 feet, 500, 200. The Warhawk's nose dipped, the jungle whipping past, every second an eternity. And then, with a last pulse of nerve, he touched down. Tires screamed, metal groaned, but the P-40 stayed on the runway. The crew on the ground erupted, running forward, some in disbelief. Smoke still poured from the cowling, but the aircraft held together. Adair's face, streaked with soot and sweat, revealed the exhaustion and elation of someone who had cheated death not once, but countless times in a single flight. Denjan Airfield had survived. His unthinkable choice, the inverted flight, the daring attacks, the rolling climb back to safety, had saved supplies, personnel, and a critical airfield from destruction. It was a day that would be talked about in hushed, awed tones in mess halls and briefing rooms, a story of courage, quick thinking, and the rare genius that could turn a hopeless situation into survival against impossible odds. For the men on the ground, for the pilots in the skies, it became an emblem of determination, a single P-40, a lone pilot, standing against the storm of 64 enemy aircraft, refusing to yield. And though the damage to his plane was severe, and his body exhausted, Adair had survived. The Japanese formation had been scattered, their bombing run destroyed, and Denjan was safe for now. One pilot's courage, one Warhawk's resilience, and one unthinkable choice had turned the tide of a battle that seemed all but lost. Adair's P-40 rested on the runway, smoke still curling from the battered engine, its frame scarred by bullet holes. The ground crew rushed forward, some in disbelief, others with relief, helping the young pilot from the cockpit. At 23, he had faced odds that no military manual could prepare him for 64 enemy planes, relentless pursuit, and a crippled aircraft. And yet, he had emerged alive. In the aftermath, the scale of what had happened began to sink in. Denjan Airfield was intact. 14 C-47 transport planes, vital for carrying supplies over the Himalayas to support Chinese forces, had survived. The field hospital, full of wounded soldiers, remained operational. Fuel reserves and equipment critical for the Hump airlift were untouched. One man, one P-40, had single-handedly prevented a catastrophe. The sheer audacity of his actions, diving into a swarm of enemy bombers, breaking formations, dodging fighters, and then flying a damaged plane upside down would be recounted as legend. Military reports later detailed the raid. Intelligence officers noted that the bombing formation had been completely disrupted. Instead of dropping their payload on the airfield, the Japanese bombers released bombs over scattered jungle terrain, leaving Denjan unharmed. Allied planners would study Adair's maneuvers, trying to understand how a single fighter could wield such influence over a large-scale enemy attack. His decisions defied conventional doctrine, attacking despite being outnumbered 64-1, flying inverted to extend glide, and managing a failing engine under fire, but the results were undeniable. Adair's story spread quickly among the Allied forces. Pilots shared it over radios, and soldiers retold it in mess halls across India and Burma. It became an example not just of skill, but of instinct, courage, and the human will to survive against impossible odds. The P-40, nicknamed Lulu Bell, earned its place in history alongside its pilot. Together, they had done the unthinkable. But the story also carried a deeper lesson. In war, success isn't always about overwhelming numbers or following the book. It's about quick thinking, audacity, and embracing risk when the stakes are highest. Adair had ignored protocol, calculated danger instinctively, and made choices that many would have called insane. Yet those decisions saved lives, preserved critical supplies, and prevented a strategic disaster. For historians and enthusiasts alike, the image of one P-40, climbing, diving, and flying inverted against 64 Japanese aircraft, remains a symbol of ingenuity and bravery. The odds had been staggering. Every turn, every throttle adjustment, every shot fired could have been the end. And yet, the mission was a success. The narrative of that December morning became more than a story of survival. It was a reminder that heroism can appear in the most unexpected places, often in the form of one determined individual refusing to yield. As the sun set over Assam that day, Denjan Airfield stood quiet but intact. Its defenders, weary yet unbroken, knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. A young pilot, alone in the sky, had faced overwhelming power and emerged victorious not through sheer force, but through courage, ingenuity, and an unshakable refusal to surrender. Philip Adair would go on to fly many more missions, but none would carry the same mixture of danger, drama, and sheer human ingenuity as that day. His actions became a case study in leadership under pressure, in daring that borders on recklessness but achieves the impossible. And for those who heard the story, it was a vivid lesson. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, one person's courage can change the course of events. This is the story of the day when 64 Japanese planes attacked one P-40, and the pilot's unthinkable choices shocked everyone, forever etched into the annals of World War II. Thank you for watching this incredible story of bravery. If you enjoyed this documentary, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more cinematic World War II stories of courage and survival.